All right, welcome back everyone. We're just gonna jump right into this. The oil pump finally came. That means I'm probably gonna make Street Wars, so I'm actually super excited. I just got home from work and I'm jumping on getting this motor assembled because today is Tuesday, February 26th. So technically by the time you guys watch this, the motor is gonna be done, completely assembled, and I'll probably already be at Street Wars just because of the timeline. I'm uploading these kind of like once a week kind of thing, just so I have content every week, because if I uploaded everything, anyway, that's besides the point. So I'm putting this together right now. I'm putting the oil pump on tonight, the chains and everything. Before I do that, I did actually set up the dial bore gauge, because in the last video, not the last video, in one video, I couldn't show you guys the crankshaft end plate because my dial bore gauge broke. I dropped it. So I got a new one. I set it up really quick. I want to show you guys just to see what you're looking for, what your specs are. With new thrust washers, you're looking for 4,000s to 16,000s, I believe. Actually, it's 4,000s to 14,000s on brand new thrust washers, anywhere in between there, so it's a pretty big gap. And I think the limit is 18,000s. You don't want to go any more than 18. So I'll show you my setup, I'll show you my setup and we'll check it really quick. We're gonna throw the oil pump on this. For my setup, I just use like a Harbor Freight clamp setup with the dial indicator. First thing I'll do is I'll actually push the crank towards the indicator. I zero it out that way, so I'll just get a big screwdriver right here, push it towards the front. It might zero out, yeah. So as you can see, it's zeroed out right here. You got a glare in there. Zeroed out, and then from here, I'll just pry backwards. So I'll just stick the screwdriver in here. Here, I'll hold the camera as steady as I can. And we'll pry backwards. You can see I got 5,000ths of movement. We'll move it back. Go back the other way. So 5,000ths. These are brand new thrust washers, so we are right in that spec of 4 to 14. So I just wanted to show you guys, this is a quick check and kind of a check you need to do to make sure your thrust, the crank thrust, is perfect and it's where it needs to be, especially because they give you so much room or wiggle room. This is just a setup I do. We're good. Let's throw this oil pump on. So here's just a quick layout of basically the whole timing system and the oil pump setup that I'm be using. I'm reusing my guides because these are brand new. I don't even know how many miles they had on them. I checked them out, they're fine. The chains I'm reusing as well because these were also brand new when I replaced them, maybe a couple 100 miles on them. They're still so new that you can actually still see the gold links on them. Those kind of fade over time. They're fine, I'm reusing that. I have the stock K20 girdle, and then I have a baffle as well, an oil pan baffle that I'll show you guys how I install that one. The Drag Cartel lower timing chain guide. So this is part of the of this whole kit right here, which is the I think it's the timing failsafe kit. So I'm going to definitely explain it in this video how to set this up, and the main reason why you want to go with this is this. I think this is an option though, but this came with it: the lower chain guide, the crank gear, the pulse plate, and the longer key, and the inline pro timing chain tensioner, and then just all the other miscellaneous stuff. And the pump right here, 4-piston, and all. They actually came on time, so I'm happy about that. There's not much to see with this. This is just a stock. It looks stock. So by looking at it, you can't really tell anything. All the work is done inside. I'm almost positive this is not even my pump, because I know when I cut it to fit the K20, to fit on a K24, my cuts weren't that good. So I think they just took mine as a core. I think they actually put like their little stamp or something. Oh yeah, right there. It's a little 4P right there. But this is what I've been waiting for, and this is the major key. Let me explain why. In case anybody was wondering why I took the time, or I sent my pump out to get ported, or to have a ported, why would you want a ported K20 oil pump when the K20 oil pumps are already kind of the go-to pump? The reason is, if you're revving higher than 8,500, the stock K20 pumps, they start to, it's what they call cavitate, which means starves for, not as starves for oil, it starts to create like air bubbles, and the oil pump will suck the air bubbles out, and you'll actually drop some oil pressure. If you lose oil pressure, that means you lose oil going to your bearings. And if you start to lose some oil going to the bearings, they'll get dry, they'll get hot, and they'll start to spin. And I'm almost positive that's what happened the first time I ever blew my stock, my K20. Pretty sure that's what happened. I just over revved it, took that quick second, and it just spun my bearing. So that's the main reason why you want to go to a ported oil pump, is just to make sure you can rev high if you are revving high without the oil pump starving for oil, and you can just keep sending oil throughout your whole motor, the whole crankcase, the whole crank, all the little journals. You want to make sure you always have oil pressure going through that. So that's why I went with that, because I am shifting at around 9,200. It's not my red line, but that's where I pretty much shift at. I need to, and I went all out with the whole build anyway, so I needed to make sure the motor was going to keep oil pressure at those high RPMs. So if you have a K24 block and you want to install a K20 oil pump, there's one bolt, well, not a bolt, there's going to be a little port right in here, and it has to be honest with you, I don't even know what it's called. It kind of regulates the oil pressure. On the K24s, they have an oil pump that has balance shafts in it, so instead of the K21, you'll see it only comes up to like right here. The balance shafts actually go almost up to here. It just doesn't work for revving high and keeping that oil pressure at high RPMs. So that's why they'll use those. You'll switch to a K20 oil pump, but when you switch to it, you have to take this little orifice out right here, pop it out, and sometimes the blocks come with this hole threaded, and sometimes they don't. If they come threaded, you'll just get a bolt. I'll leave like a little caption on what the thread should be. You could just thread this in with some Honda Bond, torque it down, and it'll be okay. If not, you have to put some threads in here, so just tap this hole out so you can somehow block this port, because with this port open, it's just going to dump oil out. And if it's just dumping oil out, you're never going to build oil pressure, and that's no good. You need oil pressure, so that's why you block this hole, so it can build the oil pressure on a K24 block. The K20s, you don't worry about this, and it obviously comes with its K20 oil pump, but on a K24 that you're converting to a K20 oil pump, did I say that right? K24 block that you're converting with a K20 oil pump, you need to block this hole. There's tons of write-ups on how to do it. My block already had it when I bought it, so that's why I don't really have a video on how to do that, but I'll see if I can find a K24 block and I'll show you guys how to do that. Started to installing our oil pump, we need to use the K20 oil girdle, and we're going to lay this down. It only goes down one way, so just line up all your holes. Alright, so that's good. Next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to put the crank gear right here onto the snout of the crank, because when you put the oil pump, you need to put it with the chain on. It doesn't really slide on without it. You have to kind of slide them on as one unit. So this is the modified crank gear. The reason it's modified is because this little keyway is cut right here. Let's see if we can kind of focus on that. This keyway is cut. This is not cut on the stock ones, and this is what also helps it from jumping timing. You just line up this dowel right here onto the back of the crank, and I'll show you closer in depth when we flip the motor back over. So just line this up. It should just slide on. And if you want to, it'll only go on one way, so if you could spin it, and then it'll actually click in its place. So I'll try to do that again. Okay, so it's clicked in. Now we're good. Now we're going to get the oil pump and chain. For the oil pump, there is no timing procedure. The oil pump, there's no top, dead, or whatever. It just put it on with the chain. So we'll just get the chain on right here. Line it up. And we're going to go in like that. I'm probably going to have to pull this out a little bit so we can get on it. Okay, now that we're on it, then we can see how we're going to have to walk it in as one piece. Just line everything up. Okay, and there's dowel pins on the oil pump, so just kind of push it down. And now we're good there. So now what we're going to do, get our bolts, tighten these down, and then we're going to get our guides for the oil pump. So just to make it easier for you guys to actually see what's going on, I flipped the motor back up to facing stand up. That way you can see where we're going to put everything. Next I'm going to put is this guide right here. And instead of using the factory bolts for this guide, because I'm using this lower timing chain tensioner or timing chain guide, we're going to use these longer bolts because this guide will go over this the way I'll show you. So we'll open this up, put this over it, and throw the bolts on. We'll just grab this guide. This guide goes through this just like that. It'll slide in it, and then we'll work this right in here. But what we're going to do is we're actually not going to tighten this up all the way because we still have to put our actual cam chain on there. So I'm just going to use the bolts to hold it for now, but they're not going to be tight. In the kit, there's a long and a short bolt. The long bolt is going to go on the top part of the guide. So the long one's going to go on top, shorter one's going to go on the bottom. Then we're going to line all this up. Alright, so like I said, I'm going to leave it like that. I just want the guide there to keep the chain from moving over. Next thing we're going to put is the actual tensioner for the oil pump chain. This is your oil pump tensioner. Usually when you buy them brand new, they'll have like this little clip that's holding it together. I don't have that clip anymore. You can just hold this with your fingers when you install it. It's not that hard. So here, all you're gonna do is basically get your bolt holes lined up. So I'll start one and I'll kind of push the guide in or the tensioner in by hand to get one started. And then I'll just kind of keep pushing it to get the rest of them lined up. It's not much tension at all. Now that the oil pump is installed, we're going to focus on putting my baffle on. If you didn't have a baffle, you'd pretty much be done. There wouldn't be studs. I have studs here. The studs are for my baffle. If you didn't have it, you would just throw the regular bolts in and throw your oil pan on, but you wouldn't put it on just yet. I usually put that on last because it kind of gets in the way of the timing chain So I'll throw that on at the end after the chain is on. But for my baffle, I have these little spacers that I have to install. So all they do is I'll drop them right there. Then I'll slide my baffle on. I can't remember what brand this is. This is a bolt-in baffle. I think you can find it on AFHK parts. And I got this a while ago. So all that does, that slides right on. In case you're wondering why I run a baffle in a street car that goes drag racing, is basically when you launch the car at the line, all that momentum is going to slosh all your oil back. So all the oil goes back away from the pickup because the pickup is at the front of the motor. Technically, you can cavitate the oil pump like that as well, just by not having any oil being sucked in. No matter, even if it's ported oil pump, if there's no oil getting picked up by the pickup, it's gonna suck in air. So that's why I have it, because on the hard launches and sometimes at the end of the track, I know the higher horsepower cars that are doing, you know, like maybe 150 trap speeds, when they'll throw their chute, now the front of the car nosedives and the oil just kind of sloshes everywhere. So with the baffle, it'll keep it where I want it, which is right at the pickup. That's pretty much why you do it, and that's why it's just a bolt-in one. It's a simple baffle. So next up, after we got the whole baffle on, the whole bottom of the motor, not the bottom of the motor, the oil pump section, oil section of the motor is pretty much set, other than an oil pan. Next, we're going to start laying the rockers down on the bottom so we can throw the cams on. I usually have these zip tied. I didn't zip tie them when I took them off this previous time, just because I was able to hold them together tight and they didn't move. Sometimes you can get away with it. I'm going to see if I can get away with just kind of holding this whole thing together really tight and laying it back on top of the motor. But before you do that, you have to lay a bead of RTV on the back of the head right here. So you just lay a thin bead of RTV right here, and then we'll throw the whole rocker assembly down on top of it, and then we can throw the cams in. Alright, let's straighten some things out here. This is day 2 from that last clip you just saw. I'm over here mentioning to you guys, yeah, you know, the rockers, they might go in right, they might not. I might have to zip tie them up or whatever. Literally right after that clip, I spent about 2.5 hours trying to figure out what the hell's going on, because this stuff wasn't working right. I spent almost the whole night just in the garage messing with rockers until I lost my temper. I lost my cool, and I'm like, I'm done, calling it a night. I need to figure this out, and I'm going to share my findings with you, and something that I've overlooked this whole time I've been building this kit, because this is like the second time I'm building this motor. I didn't even notice it the first time. So the exhaust side of the rockers actually sit almost butt up against the spark plug tubes. And I've never noticed that, because when I went to put it in, the rockers were stuck and they wouldn't sit on top of the valve seats or on top of the retainers. I couldn't figure out why. I kept taking them apart. I took the whole rocker assembly apart, slid them on one by one, and apparently this is normal. I reached out to Ford Piston, so big shout out to Monday actually from Ford Piston. I reached out to him and I asked him, like, yo, is this normal? Because I've been spending an hour over here trying to figure out what's going on, and he got back to me and he said that's just the way the K series is. So I'm going to show you guys so you don't assume the same thing I assumed, that something was wrong when it's not, and we could have used all that time I spent to finish the motor up yesterday. I'm just so mad I wasted all that time, but let me show you guys. So here's our front of our engine. This is our intake side. As you can see right here where the rocker is, it's got a pretty good gap where the rocker can just, it almost slide, well, it does slide all the way up. Don't lose these pins. I have to push that back in. So this is the intake side. Then if you go to the exhaust side, you see how tight that is? There is a gap, but it won't go up. And it's on all of them on the exhaust side. So I'm thinking something's wrong, but I don't know how something can be wrong if the caps are doweled and it can only be lined up one way. I was checking straightness on the galley, the oil galley where these actually go on, and I was going nuts, but Monday said that's normal. I tried to find, yeah, there's a challenge. Try to find a picture of a K series head without cams in it. I just wanted to see how the rockers were looking. The very few pictures I found with a cam in there, the exhaust sides, they do look like they're making contact, but I mean, it's not contact. But honestly, this is like the max lift these are going to see, because once we put the cams on this, these are actually going to push down. If I can even push it down, they're going to push down. So they're going to be a little more off of it, but they're not going to go any higher than that. There's no need for it. So okay, that's what I ran into last night, and I was so confused. No idea how I never noticed that before, but take this as a lesson. If you're putting your head together or your rockers on your head and you see that, that's all right. That's normal. Let's continue to the scheduled program. Before we put our cams down, we're going to put some assembly lube all over the rollers, just so that at least the rollers can pick some assembly lube up. So now with all the assembly lube on there, we can drop our cams on. Just try to be careful with this. Sometimes you got to rotate the cam a little bit until you'll feel it fall into its place. About right there actually. It's about right. About right there. Put some more assembly lube on your cams now. We're going to install our cam caps. These are numbered, and it's actually numbered on the top of the rockers. It's hard to show you. It's on top of the lower part of the cam caps, and the numbers are on the top of the cam caps. So there's number 1, and you see that arrow? That arrow points to the front of the motor when you lay these down. We're just going to lay these all down. So now with the cams down, the cam caps are down, we're going to have to torque these down. And these, I'm not going to stress, I can't stress this enough. Follow the OEM specs, follow the OEM sequence. I'll see if I leave a link down below. Like I said, I always use my the RSX shop manual, so that's my sequence I'm following. Because if you look at these, I'll show you. If you look at these right now, the cams are actually sitting on top of the rockers. So when we start tightening it, they're going to start actually putting pressure on top of the springs and everything like that. And so you can actually crack a cam like that if you don't tighten it in a certain way or evenly down. So this is why I'm telling you, I'll leave the specs down below in the description on the assembly or the tightening sequence on how to do it for the cam caps. Follow that and follow the torque they give you. We're going to do that right now, and then we're going to finally put the chain on it. One other thing I want to mention too, before you start tightening down your cam caps, make sure your crank or your piston, your number 1 pistons, or all of them actually, are kind of below the deck and not at top dead center, just because when you start tightening it, you don't know where the orientation of the cam is right now. You don't know which valves are going to be open, and they might actually want to try to hit your pistons, or if you try to turn the cam, you might hit it because it's not timed. And so Doesn't matter if you have valve clear, valve to piston clearance, they're not in time right now. So one valve might open when the piston is coming up, and it could just cause problems. You'll feel it gets stuck, and don't force anything. So the way you could tell is right on the block. So on your block, you have this little pointer right here that shows you where you can line up top dead center. And then on our crank gear, we have the other little arrow right here. So this arrow would line up with this top one when you're on top dead center, and we'll go over this when I start timing the engine. But for now, just if you had these two arrows lined up, just move it over so that way your number one piston actually started to come down a little bit, and you're giving yourself a little wiggle room just in case your valves start opening when they shouldn't. All right, so we have all of our cam caps tightened down except these two. I tightened everything down in the sequence, and then I loosened these two up just because I need this guide to be loose. Now, this is not the factory K20 A2 guide. This is a K20 Z3 upper chain guide. The reason why I went with this is because of how wide it is. Now I have the stock K20 A2 chain guide right here. You can see the difference in the width of the two chain guides. So going along with kind of the fail-safe timing system, so nothing will jump. That's why you upgrade to the longer one, just because it covers both of the cam gears a lot better, less chance of the chain to jump anywhere up here. So this is why this is loose, because I need to remove this anyway so I could put the chain over them. So we have that. You guys already know we had lower chain guide. This is loose. This is also part of the, I explained it before, just to make sure nothing jumps, and this holds the lower chain down on here to make sure the chain doesn't move, or if something was to jump, it'll never jump down here. And if you were to do, let's say, a tensioner, you wouldn't lose slack down here as well, because the guide would hold it right into its little pegs. But this is loose. We're gonna have to take this off to slide the chain over that, and then once we put the chain on, we'll start putting our guides on. Explain how to time the motor now. So before, I roughly mentioned to you guys this pointer right down here. This is what you're going to line up on the bottom of your block with your crank gear right down here. So you're going to line these two arrows up. This is showing us that our motor is at top dead center, but it could be bottom dead center as well. So what you would do, just to be safe, you'll just grab like a long screwdriver or something, put it in here, and make sure that the screwdriver is at the top stroke. So that means your piston is all the way up, because you could be 180 off with these two lines right here. So we know this is good. Next, for the cams, you're gonna have to line up these two lines right here. Make sure those are next to each other. Those are across from each other. They need to go horizontal like this. Then you're gonna have one dot right up here on your intake gear. You guys can see that dot right there. Same thing with the exhaust gear. You're gonna have that dot. Those dots need to be straight up at like the 12 o'clock position. So make sure these are straight against each other right here. Both dots are facing up, and the motor is in time. Now, these are not actually going to stay like this, because sometimes when you're moving these around, they like to jump. So Honda actually sells a tool for this. You don't need it. You can just find small drill bits, and you'll actually see I have the drill bits pegged inside of the hole, and this little hole right here actually lines into this cam cap right here, same as the other side. So there's actually a tool to hold the cams in time. You don't need it. Just find anything that'll fit, even Allen keys. You could just fit something in here, and it'll get you pretty rough, or like where you need to be in the ballpark. Because I know these are off a little bit, and the way we'll definitely fine tune it is with the wrenches or ratchets. This is a 17 and this is a 14, so I use two ratchets and I kind of go back and forth to get them in time. Our chain has colored links. I should mention, for the chain we're using a K24 chain and K24 guides. Anytime you go to a K24 bottom end, you need to use the K24 chain, timing chain and guides. For the oil pump, because this is a K20 oil pump, you use the K20 tensioner and guide and chain. So K20 on the bottom, K24 for your actual timing chain or your timing system for your cams. Now on the chain, you'll see it has gold links, two right here, and then a single gold one right here. These two gold ones, the two that are next to each other, they go on the top of the cams. The single gold one goes on the bottom on the oil pump, because there's a little mark on the bottom of the crank gear as well. It's hidden behind this gear right now. Actually, you can kind of see that little line inside. If I take this off, I could probably get you a better look. All right, so you see this little line right here? This is gonna line up with the single gold mark on our timing chain over there. And when all of these lines or all these marks are lined up, that's how you know you're in time. So let me set you up on a tripod and you can kind of see the process.
That means you're extra extraordinary.
You got your timing pretty much spot on. There's just a little gap in my chain right here, but I can fix that once I put my tensioner on, and that's what's going to come on right now. We're going to be putting our tensioner. As for the tensioner, we're using an inline pro tensioner. I've never used this tensioner before, but I've heard anytime people go to an aggressive cam setup, this is the tensioner they use because it won't jump. So we're going to try it out and see, because it came with our fail-safe timing kit. We're going to try it out. Out of the package, mine looks like it's a little too far out, and I was just trying to play with it, pushing it back. It seems like that's as far as I can get it. I know with the OEM tensioners, you can actually get this plunger and push it all the way in. I can't seem to push this one all the way in, so I don't know if it's meant to stay out a little bit, so we're going to try to work it up. I'm probably going to have to get a little more slack on the chain, so I'll play with the gears a little bit. You guys can watch me put it on, but let's see how this one holds up. This one's probably going to be a little harder to install. So I'm just going to start with a bolt just to kind of have it swing there so I can start swinging everything around. I'm already not crazy about this tensioner because that pin just popped out real easy. So I'll show you guys how to push it back in if you have to know. So if you push this plunger in, you'll see this little mechanism right here. It'll start to lock it. So you're going to just put a little tension on it and then get this little tab right up top. Pull it back. You're gonna have to find it right there, and then you can push it in. But you see what I mean now? That's basically as far as I can get it. So let me set this up all over again. Okay, so we got it. Then what you're gonna have to do is you're gonna have to let it kind of up here. You're gonna have to let it click out a little bit to let this swing. So we'll get one click. Still can't swing all the way. 2 clicks. Still need a little more. Okay, so there I had to go 3, which is probably why it's fighting me so much, but it's the only way I could get it. Then we'll put our pin back in it. Hopefully it stays this time. It's already wanting to pop back out again, so let's try this again. This is probably going to be a couple tries. So I got it on. It seems like I forced it in there to its max tension, because I didn't even have to pull this for it to pop anywhere. My marks are still lined up. Yeah, we're still lined up everywhere. What I'm gonna do, and I always do this anytime I put a tensioner on, is I'm gonna get a long flathead and pry on this guide a little bit to make sure there's no slack left in the tensioner, and we got full extension on the tensioner and it won't jump on like at the first startup. So I'll just kind of get in here and just see if I got anything else in it. No, it's got full tension on it. We're gonna go in the bag. Don't forget to take those drill bits out if you use them. And so now our motor's timed up. So you can see our 2 marks, they're right across from each other. You got the dot in the middle of the 2 gold links here, the dot in the middle of the 2 gold links there. Then we go down here. We have our gold link there. I don't know if you guys can actually see back in there. You'll see that little line. We're losing a little bit of light here. All right, so I'm shining some light in there. As you can see, that little line all the way in the back, that lines up with our gold link. So that's timed up. So our motor, if it wasn't blurry, our motor is all timed up. And we tightened up the lower chain guide, so that can be tightened up now. We're gonna go up top, retorque those top 2 ones, and we can throw an oil pan on this and the front timing cover. Okay, so now that we have the whole motor basically timed up, everything's all good. The next step we have to do is actually turn the whole motor, and we're gonna have maybe do 2 rotations. What that does is, 1, make sure nothing's hitting anything, make sure the motor truly is timed. It's going to be hard because this is a 12.5-to-1 compression motor, but there's no plugs in it, so it should spin a little easier. 2, we're verifying our timing. So when we're going to do 2 rotations, we're not going to look for the links to line up anymore, because those will probably, they won't line up for maybe another 1,000 rotations. Those are just for the initial timing. What we're going to look for is the marks on our gears. Make sure all of those line up. If those line up, our timing is good. So we're going to do that right now, do a couple rotations, and retime it, make sure everything's good, and we're all set. So I just spun the motor around a bunch of times. Those are still good. So I got one up there, got one up there. Come down here, our 2 pointers are lined up down there, and it's gonna be hard to see, but there should be another line in there which I can actually see it. So we're good. Our timing is all set on the motor now. So now we can actually take this bolt off, because we still have to put the pulse plate behind it. Okay, so with the whole front end of the motor, everything is torqued down to what it needs to be. Now we can get our cam trigger. So this just slides on right over the front of the crank right here. The difference with this cam trigger, as you can see, there's a notch cut out in this one. In the factory ones, they don't have a notch cut out. They have like a little tit hanging down, and that will actually slide into the groove right here on the crank. The reason why they cut this out is because basically the heart of this whole kit is this long keyway right here. So I have the factory one. So here's a side-by-side comparison. The stock one is on the left and the new one is on the right. As you can see, it's longer, and it's longer because that goes into our crank gear, which, as I showed you guys earlier, has got a cutout as well. So because this crank gear originally from factory, the only way it's basically on the crank is that little dowel, or yeah, that little dowel that's on the back of this that I showed you when we were first putting it on. It kind of just clicks in. that's the only way these actually kind of only hold on to the crank and keeps everything in time. So if that dowel snaps, this crank gear can just kind of spin freely on its own, and it'll just throw the timing off and destroy the motor. And that's actually what happened. It also happened, not the main cause, but it also happened on my old crank, which I should probably show you guys because I didn't even know what happened until I just started looking at it. Here's my old crank. I have this coming up a little bit. This is actually kind of a press on, which also helps it stay on, but not, I think that's what kept my motor from actually destroying itself. But down here is the dowel that's broken in there, and if I throw this down, you can actually see on the back right in here. Probably gonna need a light for you guys again because it's pretty dark, but well, you can even see there's no dowel on this crank, on the gear. It's because it sheared off. The hole is right in here. You can see the shadow. So this is a prime example of what can happen, and if this wasn't a tight press fit, this would have spun. So that's why I kind of say the heart of this kit is this dowel and the way the machine, this whole part right here. Now this dowel is actually a little thinner in the front. Whoop. As you can see, it's kind of stepped in the front, and then it gets normal size into the back. This little notch in the front, that's gonna go in forward like this. So we'll put it in, we'll line it up like that, we'll line it up with this, and then we have to line it up with the crank in the back. So I'll pull this out a little bit so you guys can even see it slide in. So you see the notch, so this is going to slide in there just like that. Then we'll put this over it. What I'll do is I'll grab like a rubber mallet, just kind of tap it to make sure it's seated all the way back there. But this is our failsafe kit right here to make sure this crank gear is spinning on the crank via this key right here. So it's kind of an extra precaution to make sure it won't spin, because it probably won't snap this. Probably won't. I don't know. Hopefully it doesn't. But this is the whole failsafe kit added. Well, this is the failsafe kit, and then with my added top chain guide, I use that as an extra. So you get the machined crank gear, the cam trigger, the crank trigger, the longer dowel pin or keyway, and then you could get this as an extra, the lower chain guide and the inline pro. These two, I know I added them extra because I wanted them, but this is your whole fail-safe kit. To literally, this chain shouldn't jump at all because we're locking it and protecting it at every angle of this chain, so we'll be fine. So I'm going to leave you guys right here because there was a lot of information thrown in this video. I understand that it was kind of between 2 days, lost a lot of time yesterday, but that's besides the point. It just gives me something extra to show you guys in case you run into that same issue. It's normal. And if it was a little rushed, I apologize. I am kind of on like a time crunch because I get home from work and I only have a certain amount of hours to get this done. So if you have any questions, leave them in the comments or definitely send me a DM on Instagram. I'll be more than happy to help you guys out with those questions. What's left right now, we're gonna throw the oil pan and the timing cover. I'll probably do that off camera because it's very simple, and honestly I could get it done a lot quicker if I'm not filming. What the next video is going to be actually is the ATI damper, the crank pulley. I'm using an ATI one. I'll explain why in the next video, and that's going to go along with this whole, I know it's going to be hard to install, and you guys will see it in the next video, so we'll just leave it at that because this video is going to keep dragging and I'll keep talking. I appreciate you guys watching. If the video helped you out, definitely give me a big thumbs up, and again, leave comments, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Stay motivated and keep making those streets louder.